Some disappearances do not begin with a scream, they begin with silence. A home that still looks lived in, television sitting in the same place it was the night before, a purse left behind, keys untouched, a car still parked outside like nobody ever planned to go far. Nothing's broken, overturned. Nothing immediately tells you what happened. And somehow that makes it worse. Because in Brooklyn, in April of 2005, Lisa Eatmon was gone. Lisa was not the kind of mother who disappeared from her daughter's life without a word. She and her daughter, Marseille, were close in a way that is hard to explain unless you have seen a mother and a daughter who moved through life almost like a pair. Lisa was the parent, yes, but she was also the person Marseille watched TV with, the person she laughed with, and the person who made ordinary days feel shared. Lisa was pregnant, and in their home, there were signs of life she was preparing for. Baby shower gifts, plans, a name already chosen for the little boy Marseille was waiting to meet, Jaden Marquis. I don't want to rush past that. Before this story becomes an investigation, and the phone records and DNA and a sanitation dock near the Hudson River, it begins in a home where a family expected Lisa to come back. At first, it did not immediately become panic. It was the kind of worry a child tries to reason through. Maybe her mom went up the street to go get something to eat. Perhaps she stepped out and would be right back. There had to be an explanation simple enough that the day could still become normal. But Lisa's purse was still there, her keys still on the kitchen table, and her car was still outside. And if you're listening right now, I want you to sit with that for a second. What would you think if someone you love vanished, but everything they would need to leave on purpose was still sitting at home? Because when someone disappears without taking the things they would need to leave, you're left with a different kind of question. Not just where did she go, but who made sure she did not come back? That is the space this case lives in at first. Not yet certainty, not yet in confession or conviction. Just a daughter waiting, a family about to be shattered, and a question that kept getting heavier. Where is Lisa? Today, we're talking about the murder of Lisa Eatmon in New York City. This is a case with a lot of layers: motherhood, betrayal, digital footprints, missed warning signs. I want to say this up front. Lisa was not just a pregnant woman who was found in the Hudson. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother, an Army veteran, and a woman preparing to raise her son. The facts of this case are disturbing, but the center of the story is Lisa, and we're going to keep coming back to that. Some details in this case come from investigative accounts and family recollections. Where exact public documentation is limited, I'm going to phrase things carefully. What is clear is this. On April 3rd, 2005, Lisa Eatmon was found in the Hudson River. She was pregnant, she had been shot, and the investigation would eventually lead to Roscoe Glinton, the man determined not to be the father of her unborn son. For the pacing of this episode, I want to move the way the family and investigators had to move. Not starting with all the answers, not assuming the ending before the evidence earns it. We are going to begin with Lisa's life, then the morning she was missing, discovery, and only after that will we follow the trail of people, records, and choices that led detectives to the truth. Lisa Eatmon was a Brooklyn woman. She served in the Army, following in the footsteps of her father. And there is something about that detail that gives shape to her. She was not someone drifting through life. She had discipline, a work ethic. She had family around her. She had already built a life. People who loved Lisa described her as someone who lit up a room. She was into fashion and sewing, the kind of woman who had her own style and knew how to carry herself. Lisa had a whole life before the worst thing. She had taste, humor, she had preference, and routines. She had a daughter who knew her in all those everyday ways the public never gets to see. And I know I say this often, but the little details are not filler. They are how we return a person to themselves. When someone loved clothes or had a way of laughing or was known for making a room feel brighter, that's not extra. That is the life the crime interrupted. Her daughter, Marseille, described Lisa as both a mother and something like a big sister. That does not mean Lisa was not parenting her. It means their bond was close, warm, familiar. Lisa was the person Marseille did life with. Lisa had been married before. She met Ariel, Marseille's father, while serving in the army. They married, had Marseille, and later divorced when Marseille was still very young. And Ariel was living in California, and investigators would later check his whereabouts. His alibi held. Lisa's family did not believe he was responsible. By 2005, Lisa was preparing for a new baby. Her coworkers had recently thrown her a baby shower. Friday had been her last day at work before maternity leave. Imagine that scene for a moment. The gifts, congratulations, the little outfits or supplies stacked up. People asking when she was due. People telling her to rest up. And they would see her after the baby came. Such a normal kind of joy. That normalcy is part of what makes the violence feel even more senseless. Lisa was not standing at the edge of an ending. She was beginning a new chapter with a new baby and her daughter. Her daughter, Marseille, was excited. Lisa and Marseille chosen a name together, Jaden Marquis. Marseille was waiting to become a big sister. That is the home detectives would later walk into, a home full of proof that Lisa intended to return. The proof was not dramatic or domestic. A purse, set of keys, parked car, baby gifts in the place where they were supposed to become useful. Those things will become quiet witnesses. According to Marseille, the last time she saw her mother, they had been watching television that night before. Nothing about the memory sounds dramatic. Marseille was anywhere between 10 to about 12 years old. And sometimes in these cases, the final ordinary moments become almost unbearable because no one knows it's final when it's happening. You do not know how to hold on longer. You don't know to ask just one more question. And you don't know that the person sitting beside you will become someone you have to remember instead of someone you get to come home to. When Marseille woke up and Lisa was gone, she waited. At first, maybe there was no reason to think the worst. Lisa might have stepped out, but then time passed, and the details inside the apartment didn't make sense. Lisa's purse was still there. Her keys were still on the table. Her car was outside. Later, those details would tell police that Marseille already seemed to understand on some level Lisa had not left the way someone leaves when they're planning to be gone. She did not take what she needed or leave a note. She didn't say goodbye to her daughter. And if you know anything about mothers who are close to their children, you know how strange that feels. There's also something deeply unfair about the way children have to make sense of adult danger with only child-sized information. Marseille did not have a timeline. She did not have phone records. She did not have detectives explaining theories. She only had the absence in front of her. Her mother was not there. And the things her mother needed were. On April 3rd, 2005, in Manhattan, a man saw what appeared to be a person in the water. The Hudson River runs along the west side of Manhattan, broad and cold, busy, touching New Jersey on one side and New York on the other. It's the river that carries ferries, debris, tides, history, and sometimes secrets people hope will stay submerged. When the recovery team arrived, they found a woman in the water. She was pregnant. Emergency personnel did what they were trained to do. They brought her onto the dock, they alerted EMTs, and they tried to revive her. Her body temperature felt warm enough that they believed she may not have been in the water very long, and that possibility created urgency. There was still the baby to think about. There was still the desperate hope that someone could be saved. She was taken to the hospital, but neither Lisa nor Jaden survived. At that point, investigators did not yet know who she was. They also did not know what kind of case they had. When they pulled her to the dock to try to save her, they analyzed her body, and there were no obvious signs of violence at first glance. No visible blood or bruising, no immediate explanation. So questions began to become abundant. Could she have fallen in? Was this a suicide? Was this an accident? Or was someone else involved? There are no small questions. And in the early hours of a death investigation, the wrong assumption can send everything in the wrong direction. Now, what we do know as true crime sleuths, water complicates evidence. It washes away blood, can move a body, it can disturb trace evidence and make timelines harder. It can hide what dry land might reveal immediately. But in this case, the water didn't erase everything. During the autopsy, investigators found what had been missed in the initial recovery. Lisa had a small caliber gunshot wound to the back of her head. It was tiny, about the size of a pencil eraser, and her hair extensions covered it. That's why no one saw blood when she was pulled from the river. That's why at first, the case looked uncertain with all those questions I mentioned before. But now, that erased all questions. Lisa Eatmon had been shot. This was a homicide. And now investigators had to work backward from the river. Who was she? Where had she been killed? How did she get from Brooklyn to the west side of Manhattan? Who had access to her in the hours before she died? And who had reason to want Lisa and her unborn child gone? They searched for anything that could identify her. She did not have a purse or money, but she was wearing a black jogging suit, and she had a military ID inside. That ID gave them her name, Lisa Eatmon. When detectives ran her name and date of birth, they got an address in Brooklyn. And then they had to go to that address not knowing what they may find. If Lisa had been shot somewhere else and dumped in the Hudson, her home could be a second scene, or it could be untouched. Or possibly, someone dangerous could still be connected inside. They arrived at the Brooklyn address and saw Lisa's car outside. That was one of the first big contradictions. If her car was at home, then how did Lisa get into the Hudson? That question becomes one of the hinges of the entire case. Because if Lisa had not driven herself, then either someone picked her up, someone convinced her to leave, or someone forced her into a situation she never would have chosen. Police could not assume which one yet. They had to let the evidence answer the question. Detectives Na, a young girl, answered. This was Marseille, Lisa's daughter. She told them Lisa lived there. They asked if she was home alone, and she said yes. When they asked if they could come inside, Marseille hesitated because her mother told her never to let anyone in. That detail hurts because even in Lisa's absence, her parenting was still present. Marseille was still following her mother's rules. After detectives showed their badges, she allowed them inside. The apartment was clean. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no visible chaos, no scene that immediately explained what happened to Lisa. Marseille told them her mother had been there the night before. They'd been watching TV. When she woke up, Lisa was gone. She thought maybe Lisa had gone up the street, but Lisa always came back. This time, she had not. Everything in the apartment looked like Lisa was supposed to come back. Her purse, keys, and car was outside. The baby shower gifts were still stacked in the home. There is a particular cruelty in investigations having to stand in front of a child who does not yet know she's already grieving. They didn't tell Marseille immediately that Lisa was dead. They needed a family member, so they took her back to the precinct while they tried to contact relatives. They gave her pizza and a drink and put on cartoons. And I keep thinking about that image. A child in a police precinct eating pizza, watching cartoons, while adults around her know her mother is not coming back. Eventually, her uncle came and drove her to Philadelphia. Marseille later described the ride as unusually quiet. Of course it was. How do you fill a car with words when everyone inside it is carrying news too heavy to say casually? Lisa's sister, Darlene Jabir, got a call from their youngest brother. He told her Lisa had been found in the Hudson River. Darlene screamed. She described it as a call you never expect to get, and Marseille would eventually be told by her grandmother that her mother was dead and was never coming back home. She immediately shut down, cried, and stayed in her room. There is no clean way for a child to absorb that kind of loss. Adults search for language, and children are left with absence. When Lisa's body was recovered from the Hudson, pregnant and dead, media coverage knew the emotional charge of a story involving a pregnant woman found near water. Some accounts referred to Lisa in blunt, dehumanizing terms, reducing her to a body in a river. But Lisa was not a symbol. She was not a comparison point. She was not a headline designed to echo another woman's tragedy. She was Lisa, and her family was not consuming this as news. They were living it as devastation. Now, police had to start where their cases usually start, with the people closest to Lisa. They looked at Ariel, her ex-husband, and Marseille's father. That does not mean Ariel was being accused. It means detectives have to begin with proximity. Former partners, current partners, family tensions, anyone with access, anyone with motive, anyone whose story had to be verified. Ariel had been in California, and his alibi checked out. That helped narrow the field. Then Lisa's family told investigators about Roscoe Glinton. Roscoe worked for the New York City Department of Sanitation. According to case accounts, he and Lisa had met while he was en route. They exchanged numbers, they dated, and the relationship became physical. At some point, Lisa became pregnant. Family members described the relationship as appearing healthy at first. Marseille remembered Roscoe as kind, nice to them, but Lisa's sister said the first time she really heard about Roscoe was when Lisa said she was pregnant. And from the outside, Roscoe did not enter the story wearing a sign that said danger. To a child, he seemed kind. To some people around Lisa, he may have seemed like the man connected to the baby. In real life, suspects do not always arrive looking suspicious. Sometimes they arrive as the boyfriend, the coworker, the person who knows how to smile in the right room. Then Lisa learned something that changed the way she understood the relationship. Roscoe was married. According to Lisa's family, she had not known that initially, and when she found out, rightfully so, she was upset, as many people would be. But she was not destroyed by it. She had support, she had family, and was prepared to raise her baby, even if Roscoe wanted no part in it. Roscoe allegedly told Lisa he did not want anything to do with her or her child. That is a cruel thing to say. But Lisa's response, as described by her family, was steady. She essentially told him she could move forward without him. She was raising Marseille by herself, and she could do it again with her village. I want to pause here because sometimes people misread independence as safety. We tell women, just leave, move on, just raise the child without him, as if a woman deciding to continue her life automatically removes the danger. But in some cases, a woman moving forward is exactly what threatens someone who wants control. So police needed to speak with Roscoe. But at this point, needing to speak with him did not mean the case was solved. It meant he was significant. It meant his relationship with Lisa, his possible paternity and marriage, and his reaction to the pregnancy all had to be tested against evidence. When Roscoe came in, investigators wanted to understand the nature of his relationship with Lisa and where he had been around the time she disappeared. They offered him water. Mm, that cup would come back into the story because detectives wanted his DNA to compare against the DNA of Lisa's unborn son. Roscoe told investigators as he sipped his water he had met Lisa during his sanitation route and he admitted they exchanged numbers and had a physical relationship. But he minimized the relationship. He said it ended quickly. He also told investigators he had 3 children and was married. That is the kind of thing detectives listen for. Not because minimizing an affair proves murder, it doesn't. People minimize embarrassing or painful truths all the time. But investigators listen for scale. Does the person describe the relationship the way everyone else describes it? Do they make it sound smaller than it was? Do they sound honest about what they had to lose? When asked about the day of Lisa's murder, Roscoe gave an alibi. He said he had been out with coworkers at a bar for a going away gathering for someone leaving for military service. He claimed he had been there for hours. On the surface, that could sound solid. A public place, coworkers, a reason to be out late. But alibis are not just about whether someone was seen somewhere. They're about timing, movement, consistency. Whether the story stretches across the whole night or only covers part of what someone wants to be covered. At the sanitation garage, coworkers confirmed some of the story, but not in a way that put questions to rest. Some said Roscoe had been at the bar, but they were surprised by his behavior. He was present, but not really engaged. He was not talking to many people. It was almost as if being seen mattered more than being part of the party. At that point, the alibi did not clear him. It needed pressure. Meanwhile, detectives were still trying to determine whether Roscoe was the father of Lisa's baby. They also had to look at other possible relationships because Roscoe claimed Lisa had been seeing other men. One name that he came up with was Omar, and I think this part is worth slowing down for. Because if you rush a case, you can make the ending feel inevitable. But investigators could not do that. They had to ask the uncomfortable questions. They had to consider the possibility that someone else had motive, access, or opportunity. They had to clear what could be cleared because a case built on assumption is a case that can fall apart during trial. Omar and Lisa were friends. According to Lisa's sister, Omar admitted that he and Lisa had a sexual relationship, but he said the sexual part began after Lisa was already pregnant. Marseille believed Omar might have been the father of her baby brother. So investigators had to take that possibility seriously. Omar said he had been at work at the Port Authority the night before Lisa was missing. That alibi was checked, and there was video footage showing him at work all night. He also agreed to provide DNA, and the results showed he was not Jaden's father. That brought investigators back again to Roscoe. And while they waited for DNA results, they turned to phone records. This is where the case starts to change shape. Up to this point, investigators had people and statements. Now they were getting something colder, less emotional, and often harder to talk around records. People can forget, and people can lie. They can misremember a night because they were scared, embarrassed, grieving, or guilty. Records aren't perfect either, but they give investigators something to compare the stories against. The next break came from the phone records. Once police pulled records for Lisa, Roscoe, and Omar, the timeline started to sharpen. On Saturday night into early Sunday morning, Lisa received a phone call at around 3 a.m. The call came from a payphone at a gas station not far from her home. Lisa answered and spoke for a few minutes. That is a chilling detail because it tells us Lisa was alive at 3 a.m. and talking to someone close enough to her world to reach her directly. Police checked for surveillance near the gas station, but there was no footage that captured the payphone. So they had the call, but not the caller on camera. And this is where modern technology, even in 2005, starts whispering through the case. Back then, cell phone tracking was not what most of us think today. We were not living in the same app saturated world where phones constantly shared precise location with maps, social media, rideshare apps, and cloud services. But cell phones still had to communicate with towers. Calls had to route through infrastructure, and every connection could leave a trace. A tower ping does not work like a tiny flag planted exactly where a person is standing. It is not perfect, but it does not say Roscoe was on this exact square of sidewalk at this exact second. Cell site information is messier than that. Towers cover areas. Signals can overlap. A phone may connect to a tower based on distance, congestion, terrain, network load, or technical factors. But when investigators look at sequence of calls over time, that pattern can start to say something. One ping may be vague, several pings moving in a direction can begin to show a route. In this case, Roscoe's wife had been calling his phone repeatedly that night. He was not answering, but those calls still created records. Each attempted connection helped place his phone within the cellular network. And according to the case account, those records showed a path that did not match the story Roscoe told. His phone activity moved from the bar in Manhattan toward Brooklyn, near the gas station payphone where Lisa got that 3 a.m. call. Then the activity moved back toward Manhattan near the sanitation depot by the Hudson River. So now the investigators had a problem with Roscoe's alibi. He said he was at the bar for a few hours, and the record suggested movement. And when detectives checked the video, they found evidence that he left the bar earlier than he claimed. The alibi was breaking. Police also spoke with Roscoe's wife. She said she had no idea he was cheating. They put him on full blast, by the way. And even after they confronted her with his affair, she did not believe he was capable of murder. That reaction is human. People often imagine that if someone is capable of violence, there must be signs that announce it clearly. But a person can be unfaithful, secretive, angry, controlling, and still look ordinary to people sharing a home with them. Isn't that scary? Sometimes the most frightening thing about a suspect is how normal they have managed to appear. Now, Roscoe's wife told investigators she had called him repeatedly and he had not picked up the entire time she called. He came home around 5 a.m., and when she confronted him about not answering, he said he had been having a good time at the bar. It was loud. But the phone records were saying something different. Not loudly or dramatically, just consistently. And that's what makes digital evidence so unsettling in a case like this. It does not care about confidence. It doesn't care how calm someone sounds in an interview or whether someone has a wife at home, coworkers at a bar that saw him there, or a story that almost works. It just sits there, recording little pieces of movement, not the full soul of a night, but enough to make a lie start sweating. The trail led investigators to the sanitation depot near the Hudson River. Roscoe worked for sanitation, and that area gave him access to a dock near the water. Police began canvassing the area. Fire department personnel had a harbor launch north of the sanitation depot, and when they talked to them, witnesses reportedly remembered seeing a silhouette of someone moving down from the depot area toward the harbor, but at the time, it did not seem significant enough to trigger an alarm for anyone. Roscoe's coworkers also gave investigators another detail. They said Roscoe had been unusually attentive to cleaning the dock near the water. That struck them as odd because Roscoe was not known for being the cleaning type, if you get what I mean. That is one of those small behavioral details that may not mean much alone. But in context, it starts to feel different. A man whose phone places him near the area, a dock with direct access to the river, a woman found in the Hudson, coworkers noticing unusual cleaning from a coworker who never cleaned. So they went to the dock. It was a straight drop into the Hudson River. They designated the area as a crime scene. Divers searched the river for the gun, but according to the case account, they did not recover it. The investigator found blood on the dock area. It was Lisa's. That changed everything. The river was no longer just where Lisa was found. Now there was evidence pointing to where she may have been shot or placed into the water. Then, finally, the DNA results came back. Roscoe Glidden was Jaden's father. The number reported in the case account was 99.9%. That result did not just answer a paternity question, it gave investigators a strong motive. Roscoe was married. He allegedly rejected responsibility for Lisa's pregnancy. Lisa had family support and was prepared to raise the child. There was also the issue of child support, which prosecutors believe was a part of the motive. According to the case account, the amount discussed was about $30 a week. And I'm sorry, but $30? That is where I have to stop for a second. Because how do you put a number that small next to two lives? The safe theory was that Roscoe used the going away party as a cover. He made sure he was seen, left earlier than he admitted, contacted Lisa from the payphone near her home, brought her to the sanitation depot, shot her, and pushed her body into the Hudson River. He may have believed the water would hide the crime, but the Hudson River did not keep her. With the phone records, broken alibi, DNA, the blood evidence at the dock, and witnesses' statements, investigators built their case. Roscoe Glidden was indicted and arrested. On November 21st, 2006, he was convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. For Lisa's family, there was a relief in knowing he was off the street. But a conviction cannot reverse the moment Marseille woke up and her mother was gone. It cannot bring Jaden into the world and cannot give Lisa back the maternity leave she was about to begin or the years she should have been with her children. And then there was Deborah. According to the case account, Roscoe had been a suspect in the disappearance of his former wife, Deborah, in Newburgh, New York, 3 years before Lisa was killed. Deborah disappeared in 2001. There was haunting similarities. Deborah's purse, car were reportedly left behind. So was Lisa's. Deborah's remains were later found off of a highway connected to a route Roscoe traveled for work. Lisa's body was found in the Hudson near an area connected to Roscoe's job. And there was another detail that disturbed investigators and family members. Deborah and Lisa were said to look similar. When the lead detective in Lisa's case learned about Deborah and reached out to the Newburgh police, the Newburgh detective reportedly responded with words that are almost impossible to forget. "Don't tell me he killed again." That sentence opens up a different kind of wound. Because once there is a second woman, a second set of similarities, a second story of belongings left behind, the question becomes larger than one investigation. What do we do with patterns before they become proof? That is one of the hardest questions in cases like this. The justice system is built on evidence, as it should be. Suspicion alone cannot convict someone. Similarities alone cannot always prove what happened, but families often live in the painful space between what they believe and what can be proven in court. And when another woman dies, everyone starts looking backward, asking whether something could have been done sooner. That is not always a fair question, but it's a human one. What remained after Roscoe's choices was Lisa's family. Marseille lost her mother. She also lost her baby brother, who she'd been waiting for. Lisa's siblings lost their sister, her parents lost their daughter, and tragedy would strike the family again later that year. In September of 2005, Lisa's father died. Her older sister, Darlene, said she believed her dad died of a broken heart. That phrase can sound poetic from the outside, but anyone who has watched grief move through a family knows it can be physical. Loss changes people. It changes their sleep, health, appetite, their sense of time. It can age a person. It can hollow out rooms that used to be full. Marseille has spoken about remembering her mother through the things they did together. That is how memory often survives for children and everyone. Not in grand speeches, but in fragments, shared activity, laugh, smell, a favorite show, the way someone got ready in the morning, the way they said your name. Her words about Lisa were simple. I miss her. I just miss her. There is nothing to add to that would make it more powerful. When I sit with this case, I keep coming back to how much of it depended on people paying attention to what did not fit. The purse left behind, the keys on the table, and the car outside. The phone workers that quietly challenged the story. The coworkers who remembered behavior that felt off. The blood on the dock. The details were not loud at first, but together, they started telling the truth. And maybe that is the takeaway here. Sometimes justice does not come from one dramatic moment, and sometimes it comes from small things refusing to line up. It also makes you think about how dangerous secrecy can become when someone is more concerned with protecting an image than protecting human life. Wasco did not have to love Lisa. He did not have to build a future with her. He didn't even have to be the man she hoped he would be. But he did have a responsibility to let her and her child live. That's the part I sit with. Because this case is not just about betrayal. It's about what can happen when control, shame, and entitlement start making decisions for someone. And those things do not always announce themselves as danger in the beginning. Sometimes they look like avoidance, lies, silence, a person trying to keep one life from touching another. So if there is anything we can carry forward, maybe it's this. We have to take the quiet warning signs seriously, not in a way that makes us paranoid, but in a way that makes us honest. When someone's story keeps shifting, when their actions do not match their words, and when a person becomes more focused on hiding consequences than facing them, that's worth paying attention to. Lisa's case was solved because people kept following what did not make sense. And in the end, the river did not get the final word. The truth did. Lastly, as I reflected on Lisa's case, I could not help but think about other cases we've covered here on Murder in the Black. Cases where women were pregnant, vulnerable, hopeful, or simply trying to move forward with their lives. And the men connected to them chose violence instead of accountability. I thought about Sharika Adams, who was killed while pregnant in the Ray Caruth case, Lisa Eatmon, who were not asking for anything unreasonable. They were asking for truth, support, responsibility, or simply the right to continue their lives in peace. My call to action is this. If you're in a situation where someone's reaction to your pregnancy, your independence, your boundaries is making you feel unsafe, tell someone. Not just a friend who will keep the secret, but someone who can help you make a plan. A family member, a trusted coworker, a domestic violence advocate, a counselor, someone who will take you seriously. And for the people listening, who are the friend, the sister, the cousin, the coworker, do not brush it off when the woman says something feels wrong. Ask one more question. Check in again. Offer help without judgment. Sometimes support is not a speech. Sometimes it's a ride, a place to stay, a screenshot saved, a phone call answered, or simply believing her the first time. If we can learn anything from these cases, our hope is this. Pay attention earlier, listen closer, and never let someone convince you that your life, your child, or your future is a problem they get to erase. If you or someone you love is experiencing abuse or feel unsafe, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this episode with someone else who loves thoughtful true crime stories. Follow Murder in the Black on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube for updates throughout the week. And if you're looking for even more content, check out our paid subscription for exclusive episodes and behind-the-scenes conversations. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this is Murder in the Black. I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.